general view called the evolutionary approach. We don't mean evolutionary in the sense of, like we talked about in science, of evolving from simple cell organisms and primates. This means more something about how societies evolve or change through time, okay? So these are going to be our first two that are in the evolutionary approach. And generally, the evolutionary approach takes the idea that if you look back into the prehistoric and ancient world, societies, all human societies start out as small scale. They're small, they're not complex and big, empires and civilizations like that. They're very small, tribal, very local, okay? So it says, well, if you want to know where do religions come from originally among humans, the idea is you would look at small-scale societies and look how they're religious. And the notion is, as societies evolve and become bigger, more complex, so do religions grow and evolve and become more complex. That's the idea. Okay? So does that general idea make sense? So if we could look at, we can't go back in time. There's no time travel, as far as I know, that you can go back and look at small-scale societies in the prehistoric past. But what we could do as a method, as an approach, is look at small-scale societies that exist today, look at how they're religious, how they organize their societies and how they're religious, and then from there say, well, that's how small-scale societies are today, so that's probably how small-scale societies were in the prehistoric past. That's the approach, okay? Do you see any weaknesses in this method, by any chance? Yeah, like what? Right, in our time period, right? So is it necessarily true that small-scale societies today will be like small-scale societies in the distant past? Not necessarily, right? I mean, but that's the method. So there is some weakness to it, right? But that's the general method, okay? All right, so our first of these two theorists is E.B. Tylor. This guy's theory is the first one that's the question on the quiz today. I've noticed that all the pictures I have of these guys, they have beards. And his is like a little weird. I don't know if that makes you like a good theorist, having a beard. I don't think that's the case, though. So he's an English anthropologist during the time where the British Empire dominated the globe. They're sending back writings from administrators and different people around the British Empire, around the world, that are writing about, oh, these people are religious like this in India, Africa, the Americas, and then sending these letters back to the British Library, and people like him are reading them and being like, oh, that's what small-scale societies are like. So he compares them all and says, well, what's the common denominator? What's similar about them all as small-scale societies? Okay? And the thing he says, well, when you look at all these small-scale societies, the thing that's similar about them is they all have a belief in spirits. Okay? The word in Latin is anima, like animated. Right? It makes it look like it has emotion, like a cartoon is an animated feature, right? It goes from like being a still picture to having motion. Okay, so that's going to be sort of the notion here. He says, you look at small-scale societies, if they're by mountains, it might be mountain spirits. By forests, it might be tree spirits. By water, it might be river spirits. But the common notion is spirits. And so he says, that's the common denominator that you can compare. All small-scale societies have, he says. And so he says that if you think of it as, okay, in the distant past, they all have this belief in spirits, and then as society grows and evolves, it becomes more complex, and so then those beliefs go from spirits to angels, demons, and then later gods, and then eventually one god, he sees it because he's in a monotheistic culture. Okay? So that's his idea. And he says, at some point, people will realize that this is just sort of a changing notion that comes from a distant past, that is going to eventually go away. People will realize this isn't true, and religion in that sense is condemned to disappear. So that's his idea, but if you look at it, I mean, religion hasn't disappeared, at least not yet, so at that point, it seems like he's incorrect, at least to date. But the idea he has is one that is universal. Human beings, human societies all have this kind of experience. Here's basically how it goes. This maybe has happened to you even. Somebody that you know dies. They pass away. Let's say it's your grandmother. I don't know. Your grandmother passes away. You go to her, one day you're talking to her, then she passes away. You go to her funeral, and then you see her corpse, her body. Her body is now an inanimate object, right? Her body is no longer, doesn't have motion anymore. Right? So it's now inanimate. You see that in, let's say, maybe even in the period of mourning or whatever. One night you fall asleep. And while you fall asleep in your dreams, suddenly your deceased grandmother is in your dreams and you can talk to her and communicate with her. And then you wake up and you're like, wait, how is that possible? I went to her funeral. I saw her body she was dead and her body was inanimate. How is it possible that I can still communicate with someone who is no longer alive? How is that possible? And the notion comes up, and you see this in philosophy, this idea of dualism. The idea is that, well, the body might be dead, but the spirit, the anima of the person continues to live on, and you can communicate occasionally with the spirit of deceased people, like in dreams or in trances or other states of consciousness. That's the idea. That experience happens in societies around the world, and so that's why you get the notion of spirits in small-scale societies around the world. Does that make sense? Right? Common experience, universal kind of experience. So this is something he's talking about from the prehistoric past, but that doesn't mean that we in the modern or postmodern world don't still have an experience and have to make choices based on this same experience. Think about it. So let's say that exact thing happens to you. Let's say this weekend you're going on a road trip, but then you fall asleep, and in your dream, your deceased grandmother comes to you and is like, "Don't go on the trip." That's my ghost voice. "Don't go on the trip." And you wake up and you're like, "Whoa, that was serious." Do you go on the trip? Or you're like, "Nah, it's just a dream. What could happen?" What happens if you go on the trip and you get into a car accident? Are you like, "I should have listened to Grandma. Like, my bad," right? Or are you like, "No, you know what? I need to change my behavior. I'm not going on that trip. Grandma said so while I was asleep." Right? You have to make the choice, and you will have to live with the consequences of that too. And not just you, right? If you roll up to, like, let's say you're going on the road trip, and your friend's going with you, and you pull up and you're like, "Hey, get in. I had this crazy dream last night where my dead grandmother told us that we're going to have a wreck on this trip, but I think it's fine, it's just a dream, so get in, we ride." And your friend might be like, "You know what? Actually, I don't want to do it." Right? So there's real sort of experience and consequences to your actions based on those things to this day. And so that's in part why this sort of theory is not like a dead theory. Okay? Does that make sense? So E.B. Tylor, where does he say religion has come from? Belief in spirits. Okay? All right, so that's our first method. Our second method, also in the evolutionary approach, same idea, look at small-scale societies, is James Frazer. James Frazer, smaller beard, and comes from, is a Scottish anthropologist, same time period, British Empire sort of thing. He says, when you look at all these small-scale societies, what he sees as the common denominator is they all have a kind of superstitious belief about cause and effect, about causality. He says where religion emerges from is belief in magic. Not in spirit, but magic. He says, if you look at small-scale societies, they all have these different kinds of superstitious beliefs. Beliefs that they think they understand cause and effect, but it's a misunderstanding. They misrepresent the real causality. So he says, look at small-scale societies, maybe there's a field, and in the field there's a big stone, but suddenly, the crop gets devastated by, pests or whatever. But around the stone, it doesn't. And so then they look and they're like, "Oh, the stone must protect the crops, but around the rest of it, it doesn't protect it." So they start treating the stone differently. They do rituals to it and that kind of stuff because they realize the stone has protective powers. And so there's a notion that they misrepresent the causality. Or he talks about a lot of different ones, but let's take something like a rain dance. There's a drought, and people need water for the crops, and so suddenly they bust out some sweet moves. And all of a sudden the rains come, and they're like, those sweet moves are the ones that bring the rain. So the next time there's a drought, they're like, bust out those sweet moves again, we need the rains to come. And the rains come. And so he says, they think the rain dance, there's a causality between the ritual, in this case doing a dance, and bringing the rains. But then he says at some point, these rituals fail, they don't work. They treat the rock differently, or they do the dance, and whatever their effect they're looking for doesn't happen. And he says from that, then people change their consciousness. The way that their cognition changes and evolves as society gets more complex. And so they start to do rituals that worship unseen entities. Gods, angels, demons, God. And he says by sacrificing, by worshiping, by praying to different kinds of deities, gods, and that kind of stuff, sometimes the rains come. Sometimes the crops are protected. And when it doesn't happen, they just kind of explain it by, well, the gods didn't want to give it to us, or we didn't sacrifice enough, or we didn't worship in the right way. And so he says, eventually, again, cognition changes again. People evolve away from that as society grows and becomes more complex, till eventually science emerges. So from magic to religion to science. So then he says proper causality is attributed. It's not the stone, it's something about the stone's material. So they develop herbicides or pesticides and the crops are always protected. Or you seed the clouds and the rains always come. Right? So he says eventually proper causality is attributed, and when that happens, religion will kind of disappear. Okay? He says though that magic is sort of an attempt. It's an attempt at rationality. It just is a failed attempt. It's a misrecognition of the proper causality. Okay? This again, same sort of thing. Even though he's arguing about something in the prehistoric and ancient kind of world, this is still something to this day that people have kind of beliefs about magic, that they still operate, and you might as well. I've seen this in a bunch of different ways. Athletes are really guilty of this. You see this in baseball. The batter gets into the box and every time does the same thing, the same ritual. Ball. Gets out of the box, gets back in the box, does the ritual all over again. Pitcher does the exact same thing. At some point in the majors, the commissioner had to be like, stop doing magic, stay in the box, the games are going too long. Right? But like, why do they do that? Because one time in Little League, like they hit a home run after they did the ritual and they're like, that's the ritual that brings home runs. Really? Well, they make millions of dollars, so maybe really, right? Or, I mean, I know I played volleyball collegiately, and like at some point I did this kind of stuff too. I would like take the ball every time I would serve, and I would bounce it 7 times and spin it in my hand 7 times, and then I would serve. But what would happen if I spun it like 1 too many times? All of a sudden I'm like, oh wait, time out, I gotta start again. Everybody's gonna be like, are you, get in there and serve the ball. We got stuff to do, right? But I wasn't ready. Right? What about the magic? So athletes are guilty of that kind of stuff. I've seen drivers are guilty of this. I've seen in other countries where they'll have like, and here too, but they'll have something like on their dash that's like protective. It protects them while they drive. I don't know, like you've got a little troll doll you put on your hood or on the dash of your car because one time you were driving and the troll doll was in the car and you got into a wreck, but you were safe. It should have been worse, but you were protected. So now you keep your troll doll on the dash all the time because it protects you. No, it doesn't protect you. Keep both hands on the wheel. Right? Not like, oh, the troll doll's got from here. No, drive. Both hands on the wheel, right? Students are also guilty of this. Like, one time you forgot to study for an exam, but then you went in and somehow you got a B. Must have been your lucky shirt, right? So you're like, oh, I'm never going to wash my lucky shirt. It's got all the good magic juices in it. I don't even know. And so the next time you're like, oh, I forgot to study. Wait a minute. I'll just bust out my sweet magic shirt and I'll get another good grade. No. Study and also wash your shirt. Right? So people are guilty of this kind of thinking even to this day. Right? So these are not like dead theories in that sense. But the approach is they try to look at, in the distant past, small-scale societies is what we emerge from, and as societies evolve, what religion is in small-scale societies, that gives us an inclination for where religions evolve from. That's the notion. Right? Does that make sense? So Frazer says, where does religion come from? From originally a belief in magic.
What's like the difference between like magic and like superstition?
In this sense, not a lot, because it's the idea is like you think one thing causes an effect when, I mean, I don't think it does, but that's the idea, right? So you do certain things because you're superstitious, that kind of view of magic. Similar, yeah. Okay? All right, so those are our first 2 methods. All right.